It started as an ordinary morning, or, at least, I thought it was. I woke to the soft chime of my phone, the glow of notifications painting my dark room in pale blue. I rubbed my eyes and sat up, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. My bed was warm, my room silent, or at least, it should have been. When I picked up the phone, the screen made me freeze. There was a new photo in my gallery that I didn't remember taking. My heart skipped a beat. My eyes widened as I tapped the image to open it. It was me, lying in bed, blankets pulled up to my chin, hair messy, eyes closed. The photo was taken from the exact angle my bedroom camera would capture if someone were standing on my ceiling, hovering. The timestamp said 3:11 a.m. I blinked, thinking it must be some kind of glitch. Phones sometimes duplicate images, right? I scrolled through my gallery. No duplicates, no edits, just that single photo. I didn't remember taking it, and yet, everything about it was real. My room, my bed, my sheets, every detail, perfectly intact. My pulse quickened. I live alone, absolutely alone. No roommate, no neighbors with keys, no relatives who could have snuck in. My first instinct was to dismiss it, maybe some weird cloud sync or an automatic backup gone wrong. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Something about the image, something about the way the light hit my face, felt wrong. I set the phone down and tried to breathe. Maybe it was a coincidence, a technical error. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. But later that morning, as I brewed coffee and tried to distract myself with the news, I felt a creeping unease. My phone vibrated again. My stomach dropped. Another photo had arrived. I hesitated before opening it. My hands trembled, and then I saw it. The same view, the same room, the same bed, but I was slightly different. My eyes were open a little this time, wide and darting. My hand rested awkwardly on the blanket, as if mid-movement. My heart pounded in my chest. I backed away from the phone, my body cold with fear. How could someone have taken this photo? How could someone know what I was doing while I slept? I immediately checked my security cameras. Every door, every window, nothing. No signs of entry, no disturbances, no evidence of anyone having been in my apartment. The locks were intact, the doors bolted. My nerves screamed at me. Someone is watching. I tried to focus on logic. Maybe my phone had been hacked. Maybe some app had secretly gained access to the camera. I scrolled through permissions, checking every app installed. Nothing. No new installations. No suspicious activity. Everything seemed normal. And yet, the photos kept coming. By that evening, the tension in my apartment was unbearable. I tried to eat, to read, to watch TV, but every glance at my phone made my stomach knot. Around 10 p.m., I finally put it on the counter and decided to go to bed. I didn't want to risk another photo appearing while I was trying to sleep. But as soon as I laid down, every creak of the apartment seemed magnified. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. The silence was heavy, oppressive. I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. Sleep was supposed to soothe me, but I couldn't. And then, as the clock struck 3:11 a.m., my phone buzzed. I froze. My heart leaped into my throat. A third photo had arrived. I hesitated before looking. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. But curiosity, or maybe sheer terror, forced me to open it. It was me again, in the same position I had been moments ago, or so I thought. But now, the image was more detailed. My eyes were wide open, staring straight at the camera, or maybe not the camera. Something about my expression didn't match my own reflection. My mouth was slightly open, lips trembling, as if in the time. It read not the current time, not last night, but tomorrow at 3:11 a.m. I dropped the phone. My breath caught in my throat. My body shook uncontrollably. My mind raced. How was this possible? How could a photo of me sleeping arrive before I had even done it? I sat up in bed, trying to calm down. My apartment felt impossibly quiet, the shadows longer than usual, stretching unnaturally along the walls. Every creak of the floor, every faint hum from the fridge, every flicker of light felt amplified, menacing. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend it was a technical glitch. Something or someone was watching me, not just watching. Predicting. I reached for my laptop and started researching. Surveillance hacks, deepfakes, malicious apps. None of them explained what I was experiencing. None of them could account for the future TIMESTAMPS. By now, sleep was impossible. I spent the night awake, phone in hand, heart hammering, scanning for movement, listening to every tiny sound, every creak, every shadow, every gust of wind through the slightly cracked window sent shivers down my spine. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke with my face pressed into the pillow, drenched in sweat. My phone was beside me, screen glowing softly. Another photo had arrived. This time, it was worse. I was sitting up in bed, staring straight ahead. My eyes were wide with terror, my body rigid, almost like I had been forced into that position. The time's tomorrow, 3:12 a.m., I screamed. My voice echoed through the empty apartment. Max, my old golden retriever, jumped onto the bed, nuzzling me, sensing my panic, but even his presence couldn't calm me. Something beyond comprehension was observing me, not just watching, not just knowing, but controlling the sequence of events in some impossibly precise way. By sunrise, I felt hollow, exhausted, terrified. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't a prank, a glitch, or a technical anomaly. Something was here. Something was watching me, and it wasn't going to stop. I didn't know what it wanted. I didn't know if it was human. But as I stared at the next photo arriving on my phone, I realized the most horrifying truth. I was not alone. I hadn't been alone for weeks, and now, I was trapped in a nightmare that hadn't even happened yet. After the first terrifying night, I knew I couldn't ignore it. The photos weren't just evidence, they were a warning. Something or someone was watching me while I slept, and worse, it was predicting my every move. I spent the next day obsessively checking my phone, trying to anticipate the next photo. The anxiety gnawed at me, making it impossible to focus on anything else. Work, forget it. Eating, I barely managed toast. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach dropped. I felt as if the very air around me had grown heavy, dense. Watching. Around 3:11 p.m., I noticed my apartment was different. Not physically, but in the way the light fell across the room. The shadows stretching a little too far, bending around corners like they had their own intention. Every object felt alive. My eyes kept darting to the ceiling, the corners, the floor, searching for the impossible. When night came, I tried to sleep in a different room, anything to break the pattern. But as soon as the clock edged toward 3:11 a.m., my phone vibrated violently on the kitchen counter. I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears. I ran to pick it up. Another photo. This time, it wasn't just me. The photo captured my bedroom from an angle I didn't recognize. I was sitting on the bed, hands gripping the blanket, staring into the darkness. Behind me, faintly, almost imperceptibly, a shadow, shaped like a person, but blurred, distorted, something unnatural. I dropped the phone in horror. Max growled low in the hallway, hair bristled, staring toward the bedroom. I wanted to flee. I wanted to leave the apartment forever. But something in me, a mix of fear and disbelief, demanded I see what was happening. I opened my laptop and began researching the phenomenon. Photos arriving before events, pre-recorded sequences, predictive algorithms. None of it made sense. None of it explained the entity in the corner of the photo. And then the texts started arriving. My phone buzzed again. A notification. This time, a message from an unknown number. Don't move. I see everything. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight. I froze mid-breath. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't technology malfunctioning. This was conscious, observant, intelligent, and malevolent. The night dragged on. I didn't sleep. I didn't dare leave the bedroom. Every creak, every draft, every flicker of the lights felt amplified, unnatural. I watched the clock tick closer to 3:12 a.m., and then it happened. Another photo arrived. This one, even more impossible. I was standing in my bedroom doorway, hands covering my face in terror, Max growling at something behind me. The shadow in the corner was clearer, now tall, humanoid, but wrong, warped, with edges like smoke or static. Its presence seemed to suck the light from the room. I screamed. My voice echoed in the apartment, bouncing off the walls. Max barked furiously, rushing to the door. But the shadow didn't move. It waited, patient, watching. I realized something terrifying. The photos weren't just capturing me, they were teaching it, feeding it. Every time it appeared in an image, it learned. Every time I reacted in fear, it cataloged my response, and it was patient. Unlike a human, it didn't rush. It waited, it observed. It evolved by sunrise. I hadn't moved. I couldn't. I was too terrified to leave the bedroom, yet too terrified to stay. My phone continued buzzing. Another message arrived. Soon, very soon, you won't wake up alone. I dropped the phone and curled on the bed with Max pressed against me. Sleep was impossible. Even my attempts to rationalize, to convince myself it was some deep fake or hack, failed. The photos had a reality to them that no digital trick could replicate. They were snapshots of moments that hadn't yet occurred. I spent the day in a haze, checking the locks, checking cameras, pacing obsessively. Every shadow seemed to twist unnaturally. Every whisper of wind sounded like movement. Even Max, normally calm and loyal, refused to leave my side. That night, I tried something desperate. I left the phone on the kitchen counter, turned off, hoping to trick it, hoping to escape its gaze. But at 3:11 a.m., it buzzed violently again. I froze in terror, running to see the next image. This one was the most terrifying yet. I was lying in bed, eyes wide with fear, and in the corner, almost subtle, a figure had stepped closer. Taller now, more defined, almost human, but not quite. It was waiting, watching, knowing. I realized I couldn't stay here. I couldn't live like this. The entity wasn't just taking photos. It was studying me, mapping my life, waiting for the perfect moment to step fully into my reality. And it was patient. I was running out of time. I began packing essentials in a bag, planning to leave. But the shadows didn't let me sleep. The phone didn't stop buzzing, and in every image, every flicker, every tiny detail, it was there, learning, evolving, waiting, and I knew that leaving might not be enough. By the third night, exhaustion had frayed my nerves to a razor-thin edge. I hadn't slept properly in days, every sound amplified, every shadow a threat. The phone continued, its relentless notifications, each one more impossible than the last. Each photo, each message, each movement, it wasn't just observing me anymore. It was learning, predicting, waiting. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't hide. The photos weren't just images, they were warnings. And the latest one had arrived just after 3:11 a.m. I hesitated before looking. My hands shook uncontrollably. Max growled low, fur bristled, ears flat. The image. It was terrifying. I was sitting upright in bed, hands clutching the blanket, staring toward the bedroom door. And the shadow figure, clearer this time, was no longer in the corner. It had stepped closer, its outline sharper, more defined, humanoid, but impossible. Its edges shimmered like smoke, dark and fluid, moving as if it existed both in our world and somewhere else. I dropped the phone, backing away. My breath caught in my throat. Max barked furiously, rushing toward the corner where the shadow had appeared in the photo. I followed, heart hammering. The apartment was silent as silent. I realized then that the entity was no longer just behind the lens. It was inside the apartment. It had been patient, observing, waiting, and now it was ready to act. I grabbed my backpack, stuffing essentials inside: keys, wallet, water, and my laptop. Anything to escape. I moved toward the door, but the shadows shifted around me, curling along the floor, stretching unnaturally across walls. It felt like a living thing, pressing against me, slowing me down. Then my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "Why are you running, Mommy? You can't hide from me." I froze, stomach twisting. The use of the word mommy wasn't just creepy, it was personal, precise. The entity had learned me. It knew me, and now it was speaking directly. I bolted toward the door, Max at my heels. The shadows seemed to pulse and move, subtly at first, then faster, almost anticipating my steps. Every creak of the floor sounded like a shout in the dark. I reached the entrance and yanked the door open. Cold night air hit me like a wall. I ran into the street, Max leading the way, never looking back. I didn't stop for hours. I drove aimlessly, apartment far behind me, heart hammering, sweat cold on my back. But the terror didn't end. The phone buzzed again in my bag. I froze, ripping it out. Another photo. I nearly collapsed. This one was in my car. Me, driving, eyes wide with fear, hands gripping the steering wheel. And in the back seat, the shadow, looming impossibly tall, just beyond the rearview mirror, edges flickering, twisting. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. How could it have followed me? How could it appear in the photo from inside the car when I hadn't stopped once since leaving? I parked, trembling, trying to rationalize. Maybe my mind was cracking. Maybe sleep deprivation was making me hallucinate. But the clarity of the photo's every shadow, every detail told me otherwise. I realized something worse. The entity didn't just see me. It existed outside my understanding of space and time. It wasn't limited by walls, doors, or locks. And it was patient. It had been watching, waiting, learning, and now it was testing boundaries. That night, I dared to return to the apartment. I had to know, had to face it, had to try to stop it. The moment I stepped inside, the shadows twisted violently, stretching along the walls, coiling around furniture like living smoke. My phone buzzed. Another photo. I looked. This time, I was lying on the floor of my apartment, eyes wide, Max pinned beside me, the shadow looming over both of us. Its edges shimmered, flickered, but its form was unmistakable. The message that followed was simple, terrifying. I told you. Soon you won't wake up alone. I realized then that confrontation was inevitable. Hiding wouldn't work. Running wouldn't work. The entity had learned me completely. It knew my patterns, my fears, and my weaknesses. Every move I made was cataloged. And now, it was ready to step out of the shadows entirely. The hours stretched, every second unbearable. I sat on the floor, Max pressed to my side, listening. The shadows moved subtly, almost imperceptibly at first, then growing, inch by inch, until they filled the corners of the room. The air grew cold, thick, oppressive. I knew it was watching, waiting, smiling, and then, a whisper, not through the phone, not through sound, but inside my mind, clear and deliberate. I am here, and you cannot escape me. I bolted again, grabbing Max and my backpack. But as I stepped toward the door, I realized something impossible. The shadow figure was now behind me in the hallway, its form warped, edges flickering, impossibly fast. My heart nearly stopped. I screamed, running into the night. But even as I fled, I knew the terrifying truth. This was no ordinary haunting. This was intelligence, patience, malevolence, and it had already calculated my every move. I realized something I could not escape. This entity was patient. It would follow. It would watch, and eventually, it would be closer than I could ever imagine. The night I returned to my apartment, I thought I might finally understand it. I thought I might confront it. I was wrong. I couldn't leave. Every street, every road, every exit felt watched. My phone buzzed incessantly, each photo more impossible than the last. I tried deleting them, smashing the phone, even throwing it into the street, but somehow, they kept coming. Even my backup phone, untouched for days, suddenly vibrated with notifications. The entity had found a way to bypass every barrier. I barricaded myself in the living room, Max growling beside me, his body tense like he could sense the danger in ways I couldn't. The shadows in the corners of the room were unnaturally dark, stretching across walls and ceiling, curling like smoke in a slow, deliberate movement. The air had grown cold, almost wet, and every breath I took sounded loud, echoing in the silence. At 3:11 a.m., as always, my phone buzzed. Another photo appeared. I nearly vomited when I saw it. I was lying on the floor, Max pressed against my chest, and the shadowful form, humanoid but impossible, loomed directly above me. Its edges shimmered, sharp and fluid at the same time, like smoke in a windless room. And then, it moved, not in the photo, in my apartment. I froze. My heart slammed in my chest. I could feel it, a presence in the room, brushing against me in a way that made my skin crawl. Max barked, but the sound seemed muffled, as if the entity warped reality itself. I realized then what I had suspected for days. It could interact with the real world. The photos weren't just warnings, they were training. Every image, every timestamp, every detail had been preparing it for this moment. I backed away, pressing myself against the wall, Max growling at the figure that now hovered near the doorway. Its form was taller than any human, edges blurred like it wasn't quite solid. Its face, I couldn't see it clearly, but I could feel its attention. I felt it studying me, learning me, testing my fear. The phone buzzed again. Another photo. I dared to look. This one was more horrifying. I was standing, hands covering my face, trembling. Max was snarling, frozen and the shadow. It was closer. It was reaching. A whisper echoed not from the phone, not from the room, but directly inside my mind. You can't hide. I am everywhere, I screamed. Max lunged at the shadow, but his paws passed through it as if it were smoke. The air around me thickened. My vision blurred. I stumbled, barely keeping my balance. I had to fight. I had to survive. I remembered reading about protective rituals, wards, anything that might push back supernatural entities. Desperate, I grabbed a lighter, flicked it on, and drew a circle on the floor with salt I had found in the kitchen. I whispered prayers I didn't fully believe in, words I didn't fully understand, but anything had to work. The shadow paused, its movement slowed. It tilted its head. I felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this fragile barrier of salt and desperate belief could give me a chance. But then, it smiled. Not physically, not with a mouth. The feeling of the smile pressed against my mind, cold, calculated, malevolent. It wasn't deterred by the salt. It wasn't scared by the prayers. It was patient. It had all the time in the world, and it knew ID and single quotes. Another photo appeared on my phone. I couldn't resist. I had to see it. I opened it. My eyes widened. I was no longer in the apartment. I was somewhere else, lying in darkness, completely immobilized. Max was pressed against me, frozen in fear, and the shadow loomed directly above, edges flickering. Its face, clearer this time, hollow, featureless, impossibly black, and still smiling. I realized the truth. It didn't need me to be asleep. It didn't need the photos to reach me. It had already learned everything about me. Every fear, every movement, every moment of panic. and it was preparing for the final step. I could run, I could hide, but the photos proved one thing: it would always find me. It was in the shadows, in the edges of reality, in the reflections of light, in the spaces where perception faltered. It existed everywhere I was. I backed toward the door, dragging Max with me, but the apartment seemed to stretch, the hallway elongating impossibly. The exit moved farther away with every step. The shadows twisted, coiling along the walls, blocking me. The entity wasn't just in the room anymore, it was everywhere. It was reality bending around it. I screamed. The salt circle shattered under its presence, the protective ward useless. My prayers faded into a hollow sound in the oppressive darkness. And then, the whispers grew louder, echoing inside my mind. Soon, very soon, you won't wake up alone. I ran blindly, crashing into furniture, tearing through rooms, Max barking desperately. The shadows chased me, curling, coiling, stretching, mocking. The photos continued, arriving on my phone, each one showing my next move before it happened. Every escape route was anticipated, every step tracked. I realized in that instant there was no escape. Not in this city, not in this apartment, not anywhere. It had patience. I didn't. I stumbled, gasping for air, and then the room shifted. The shadows condensed, forming a single, towering figure. Humanoid but wrong. Its edges shimmered, flickered, and it radiated malice. Max growled low, but even he trembled in fear. The entity leaned closer, and I felt its awareness pressing into my mind, testing, calculating, enjoying my panic. I could see the future in the flashes of my phone, the moments it had already planned, the moments I hadn't even lived yet. I realized with bone-deep terror, I wasn't just being watched. I was part of a ritual, a game I couldn't win, a nightmare scripted perfectly by a being that didn't exist in normal time. And then the whisper came again, softer, patient, omnipresent. You can run, but I will be there when you wake. I collapsed to the floor, Max trembling beside me, tears streaming down my face. The shadows retreated slightly, leaving the air thick, suffocating, cold. But I knew it wasn't gone. It would never leave. It had all the time in the world, and I had none. I woke with a jolt, my chest heaving, every muscle tensed, sweat soaking my clothes. The apartment was silent, or so it seemed. The shadows had receded, but I knew better. I could feel them lingering, curling along the walls, waiting, patient, watching Max pressed close, trembling, his eyes fixed on corners where nothing moved. My phone lay on the floor, screen cracked from the previous night's chaos. It buzzed once, then went dead, but I already knew the images hadn't stopped, they had only paused. The entity didn't need technology anymore. It existed everywhere I was. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like lead. My hands shook uncontrollably. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet I knew it wouldn't matter. The photos, the messages, the whispers, they had trained it. It anticipated my every move, every fear, every heartbeat, and tonight, I would finally face it. Around 3:11 a.m., the room grew colder, the air thick and suffocating. Shadows stretched unnaturally across walls and ceilings, coiling like living smoke. I could feel a presence behind me, behind the walls, in the reflection of the window glass, and then it appeared. The shadow figure, taller than any human, edges flickering like liquid darkness, standing just beyond the doorway. Its form was humanoid, but impossible too tall, too wide, too fluid. I could feel it radiating malice, patient intelligence, awareness of every thought in my mind. It stepped closer, not slowly, not fast, perfectly measured. Its every motion was deliberate, testing, observing, feeding on my fear. I gripped Max tightly and whispered prayers I didn't even believe, words I didn't know the meaning of. Salt crumbled under my hands as I tried to trace a protective circle on the floor. Nothing worked. The entity didn't hesitate, didn't falter. It was beyond rules, beyond reality, beyond anything I had ever known. The phone buzzed again. I looked down. Another photo. My eyes widened. It was me, lying in bed, but this time, I wasn't alone. Something else was there. Something behind me. Its form, faint but unmistakable. The shadow in the corner of the room, looming, waiting, smiling with a presence that was almost physical in its menace. I realized then what I had feared but hadn't fully accepted. It wasn't just stalking me. It wasn't just observing. It had learned me completely. Every fear, every twitch, every heartbeat. And now, it wanted to finish what it had started. I backed toward the wall, Max growling, my phone slipping from my fingers. The shadow advanced, edges flickering, stretching impossibly, coiling around the room. I screamed, but no sound came out. My voice was swallowed by the darkness, then a whisper, not from the phone, not from the room, but from inside my mind. It's time. You cannot run anymore. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall, heart racing. My vision blurred as panic overtook reason. Max barked furiously, but even he seemed aware that this was no ordinary danger. The air felt heavy, almost liquid, pressing down on me. Suddenly, the shadow lunged it physically, but in a way that warped the space around it. Reality bent. The edges of my vision twisted. My room stretched, distorted, turning into a hallway that had no end. The shadows closed in, coiling, suffocating, a living darkness that was both everywhere and nowhere. I screamed again. Max whimpered. And then the whispers began, two-layered dozens of voices overlapping, taunting, predicting, mocking. Mommy, don't move. You cannot hide. I see everything. I am everywhere. I knew then I had no options. Fighting, fleeing, praying, didn't matter. The entity didn't exist in rules, I understood. It was patient, intelligent, omnipresent. It had anticipated every possible escape, every move I could make, every reaction I could have, and then it touched me. Not physically, something impossible. Cold, deep, like 1,000 icy fingers pressing into my mind, into my soul. I screamed in agony, my vision shattering, reality collapsing around me. The shadows swallowed everything. Max growled, then whimpered, pressed against me, as if trying to shield me. But I was already slipping. Then silence. I woke, or thought I did. My eyes opened slowly. The apartment was normal, quiet. Sunlight streamed through the window. Max lay beside me, warm, breathing softly. My phone buzzed, once a normal notification this time. Relief flooded me. Maybe it had ended. Maybe I had survived. I tried to laugh, shakily. I thought it was over. I thought the nightmare had ended. But then I saw it. A shadow in the corner. Slight, almost imperceptible. Flickering, watching, smiling. And my phone buzzed again. A new photo. I opened it slowly. My stomach dropped. It was me, sitting on the edge of the bed, Max beside me, and behind me closer than before the shadow. And on the timestamp, 3:11 a.m. Tonight, I realized with bone-deep terror. It never leaves. It is patient. It is everywhere. And it will always wait. The whispers returned, soft, insidious, echoing inside my mind. I am here, and now, you are mine. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I could only watch as the shadows stretched, bending reality, and the entity stepped closer, closer than ever before, and I knew I would never be alone again.